We're just going to give a few more moments for those that are joining us to be able to get in the room. Stay tuned for just a moment. Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Found by Phone, Optimizing Mobile SEO for Enterprise Businesses. My name is Brian Smith. I'm the Director of Data Partnerships and Local Strategy at rioseo. We have lots of insightful content to share with you, and I'm sure there will be plenty of questions come after the presentation. If time permits, we'll allow Q&A at the end. Otherwise, we'll be answering all questions after the live webcast. To ask a question, please use the chat box on the right side of the screen. And due to the size of the attendances and attendees today, we'll be listening in only mode to cut down on the interruptions. So I'd like to welcome my guest speaker, Mobile Moxie expert Cindy Krum, CEO of Mobile Moxie. Cindy is a close friend of mine who has founded Mobile Moxie, formerly Rank Mobile in Denver, Colorado, in 2008 as a way to help companies harness the power of mobile marketing. In addition to helping companies improve their mobile strategies, apps, and websites, Cindy also speaks as a mobile marketing expert to many popular marketing conferences around the world. A figurehead in the marketing community, Cindy is well known for her technical expertise, her ability to explain complex problems with clarity, and her general thought leadership within the mobile space. Thanks again for joining us, Cindy. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at what we're expecting to see in today's presentation. She'll be covering why you need a mobile SEO strategy, mobile indexing and which metrics are most valuable to track, and how to get started implementing mobile strategies. Cindy, I'm going to let you take it from here. Thanks again.
Okay, thanks for the great introduction, Brian. Hi, everybody. Like you said, my name is Cindy Krum, and I'm the CEO of Mobile Moxie. We've been doing mobile SEO and app SEO since 2008, and I personally have been doing it since 2005, which is before the iPhone. So I've been doing it for a long time. I've written a book about mobile marketing. I love mobile marketing very much. So today what we're talking about is mobile first indexing and the metrics that matter. And what I want to get out of the way right out of the beginning is that we are not going to focus on Google's documentation for mobile first indexing. You guys should read it, read what John Euler is writing about in his AMAs. But I don't really want to spend too much time other than one slide talking about what's covered in the documentation. The documentation just basically tells you that mobile first indexing is about the mobile crawler being used to crawl and evaluate and index content, and that whatever you had going on your desktop site should now match the mobile rendering of the site in terms of content, internal links, schema, and hreflang. And that's basically what the documentation covers. It also talks a little bit about deferred JavaScript rendering And those are things that you absolutely should do, but that from what we know, most companies have already done. Google says that if if you have a responsive design website, then you're going to be fine and you have nothing to worry about. But I think that the documentation that Google has put out and the things that Google is talking about don't actually cover the real impact of what's happening in mobile first indexing, especially in the search results and the way the SERPs look and in the data. So today we're going to focus on what's happening in the data because SEOs love data and analytics. They pride themselves on saying that they're data-driven marketers and that data is just so core to every decision that they make. And they need the data to make really good decisions because money is on the line, time, energy, and sometimes the whole success of the company is on the line. So the question I pose to you as a great SEO is, what if the data that you're using or that you're pulling from your analytics is incomplete? That would mean you would be making potentially bad decisions or at least not great decisions. And that could be a huge risk if you think that you're doing all the right things based on the data, but some of the data just isn't accurate or isn't included in what you're evaluating. That's a problem. So at Mobile Moxie, we've been around and we've had this specialty for a really long time, and we end up working with companies that already have in-house SEOs that are already looking at the data. And so people come to us when things like this happen, where the data just doesn't make sense. So in this picture, we have an average position that improves dramatically at the same time as the total clicks drop off the map. And so the problems that we're confronted with are problems that are sometimes either not answered by data or made worse or made more confusing by data. And so since we've been around and we've specialized in mobile SEO for a long time, we're kind of like the SEO for SEOs. We untangle really weird problems and situations where the data isn't answering the question. And so I want to give you kind of what we've learned and what we're seeing in mobile first indexing, where the data just isn't giving you all the answers that you need. So I thought we'd start with a quick case study. And if you haven't noticed the theme of the deck yet, it's Airstream trailers, because that's super trendy and lends itself to some beautiful pictures. And if you're a millennial and you're kind of fed up with life, maybe you want to just go buy an Airstream trailer and say, hey, I don't need the traditional house, car, 2.5 kids and a dog. Maybe I just want an Airstream and I'm going to travel. So if you decide that's what it's going to be, you quit your job, maybe sell your home and give away all your stuff by then. Or if you've got some good savings, maybe a nice Airstream. And the plan then from there on is to be awesome and slay on Instagram, right? And the problem is, it's not always as great as what it looks like on Instagram. And you can see based on the device picture on the left, sometimes what we're sold is not what we get. And I think that's a good analogy for what's happening in mobile first indexing. But let's go with the story. So you've got your Airstream trailer. What's the first thing you need to do? Well, you need to find a place to stay. And it's winter, and I have a lot of friends who are just getting tired of the snow, especially like friends that are in Edmonton, and they're like, we need to get out of here. Edmonton's like in Canada, it's very cold and snowy there. We need to get out of here. We want to go someplace warm. So they're going to do a search from Edmonton, and they're going to say, okay, I want to find a KOA, so a campground, in Key West. So we can put in, we use our tool to simulate this and put in all those specific data points. Say, okay, what would someone searching from Edmonton see on their phone? And we have an iOS phone and an Android phone, so we can see side by side how do things look different. And then we just search to say, okay, what would these hypothetical people see when they're searching? And on the right, and you'll see soon on the left, we get this Sugarloaf Key West KOA holiday. Looks great, seems like there's availability, seems like something good to book. The first Q&A, we love this place, sounds great. click through, and you can see things are looking good. We have 4 out of 5 stars. There are some decent pictures. Looks like a fun place to stay. Now there's one bad review, bad experience, high prices. That's not great to hear. But overall, this looks like a good option. So it's the southernmost KOA. We see that in one of the pictures. That's sounding really, really great for someone who's stuck in the snow. Look at it on a map. Yep, that's pretty far south. That's about as far south as you can go with an Airstream and not a boat. So we do one last check to see what's going on as we're these hypothetical tourist Airstream owners booking a campground. We go to the website, which, you know, we didn't have to because we could have started and booked the whole thing from Google. But let's just check out the website just to see if there's anything interesting there that we need to know. Oh, no. So we get to the website and there's this alert that takes over the whole page that says, due to Hurricane Irma, the campground's closed until further notice. Please continue to check back. So that's a problem. And if we're the KOA company, right, if we're the aggregate of KOA, we would want to know that Google is sending users to a place that actually they can't book. But also we would want to know that this particular message with the contact info, an email address, and the website that just says check back, is also actually not very helpful either, because there are a lot of KOA campgrounds in Florida, and this, yes, is the southernmost one, which sounds really appealing to someone in Alberta, but there are a lot of other ones that we could have booked that didn't show up as an alternate when we clicked through on the website to find out any more details about this booking. So we could have gone all the way through, it looks like, and booked from Google, but instead we have this risk where either we're going to say, okay, everything looks fine based on Google, and drive down there and book it the night before or 2 nights before, and then find out at the last minute, but not have a good path to get to a different KOA. So that's a risk. So then let's assume a different scenario, right? Let's assume these people have driven all the way down. They're about to go on further south to Key West, and they want to make sure they've got a reservation at Sugarloaf. So they search KOA near me, assuming it's the only one, but they're on the mainland of Florida. What you can see here is Sugarloaf Key does show up, but there's also a couple of other campgrounds are showing up, Boyd's Key West Campground and Leo's Campground and RV Park. And these, if you see at the top above the map, it says that these are KOAs. And so, yes, we can click through, like you see on the right, and get to the KOA campground, but then we can click on either Boyd's Key West Campground or Leo's Campground. And the problem with this is these are not KOAs, but Google has them classified as KOAs because it said that above the map. So it seems like here, Google is counting KOA as a synonym for campground, rather than understanding that KOA is a brand. And so these Boyd's Key West Campground and the other one, Leo's Campground, they're getting potentially an unfair advantage by being called a KOA because KOA has a really good reputation in terms of campgrounds, but they're actually not KOAs. And you can see here how it says KOA above the map, and it's classifying all of these map listings as KOAs, but in fact, they're not. And so as a brand, if we're SEOs working for KOA, we care about this, and we don't like this. There's something that we clearly need to fix with Google. And so the first thing as an SEO we would want to do is look and see how often is this happening where we're near a KOA campground and other campgrounds are even ranking higher than us in a map pack. So what we did is we used the Mobile Moxie tools, put in a bunch of Florida and other KOA addresses, made a CSV, and added it to our tools where you can upload the CSV of up to 100 addresses, put in one keyword, and see in real results what those mobile listings look like in all of the different rankings. So you can go and click and compare all of these addresses and how they look on the phone to see. And so we did that and generated this spreadsheet. And you can see in the spreadsheet that we have the addresses over here, and then we have the primary ranking. Is it a GMB? Is it just a map, like a single GMB versus a map pack versus something else? And then in the map pack, is it KOA only, or are there others included? And then while we're there, we went ahead and took other notes. Is the GMB map correct? Is the GMB image useful? Does it have 3.5 or more stars? What are the average reviews, average total number of reviews? So now we have kind of a heat map of where things are looking good and where things need improvement, and especially where non-KOA campgrounds are getting into the map pack. And so then, as an SEO, we want to say, okay, now we know which campgrounds of ours are being beat out by non-KOA campgrounds. But for this particular query, with Leo's campgrounds, we want to see how far away from Leo's campground and from Sugarloaf campgrounds, KOA, do you have to be for this impact to stop, for this not to be showing up in the map pack? So we create a similar test where we search for KOA in Key West from the southern tip of Florida, but not all the way into the Keys. And then we can click around on all of these pins to see when is the non-KOA content getting into the map, and how far away do you have to be from those non-KOA campgrounds for them to slip out of the map. And when they do, are they replaced with KOAs, or are they replaced with other results? And so as an SEO, this is a big deal, right? Because if we're managing KOA campgrounds and KOA SEO, we want to know how is Google understanding KOA as a brand, and then how is the lack of understanding, in this case, impacting our ability to rank and show up in a map pack. So let's back up and talk a little bit about theory and mobile first indexing, because in that scenario we have a lot of things going on in terms of local SEO, but there's a lot more happening for mobile first indexing that you might have missed. So first off, obviously on a mobile phone, the location and the GPS information is more important. You're more likely to get the maps, and people are more likely to use the maps to get directions or to call, because it's native to the device, as opposed to a laptop where it's not really a native experience to make a call, and it's not really a native experience to get directions. But the other thing that's important to understand is the impact that Knowledge Graph and Google's understanding of the brand KOA, or lack of understanding, has on the SEO. So at Mobile Moxie, the way we talk about mobile first indexing is we talk about it as entity first indexing. That mobile first indexing is really a misnomer, because mobile first indexing really appears to be more about the knowledge graph. And of course, businesses are included in the knowledge graph, but a lot of other things are also included in the knowledge graph. So we think that mobile first indexing is the same as an aggressive knowledge graph build out, and we call it entity first indexing because knowledge graph is really just full of different entities mapped to each other by the relationships that they have. So that brings up an important question. What the heck's an entity? Well, when we think about entities can be businesses or brands, but entities can also, more importantly, are concepts that happen before keywords. So the example that's easiest to understand is the concept of mother. So if I say mother in English, everyone has an understanding of how mother is related to father and son and daughter and grandmother and grandfather and so on. Those relationships to mother don't change, even if you talk about mother in a different language. So that's where the idea of an entity is. Entities are language agnostic. They have the same relationships to other entities in every language. And the keywords that we use just describe the entity. And so historically, Google has been built around language, and language was primary. The keyword was the primary ranking factor, or the primary thing that Google cared about, was how tightly something was associated with the keyword. But when we back it up one level and we say, okay, let's talk about entities and say how closely is something related to the entity, and then keywords become modifiers or describers of an entity, and that entity can be described in every language. That gives Google something that it really wants, which is this huge advantage in languages where they don't have a high density of searchers, especially they don't have as much density or frequency of people like they do in English. In English, there are a lot of people who speak and search in English, so their machine learning algorithms get a lot of feedback fast. But in smaller languages, Google has always struggled to have really good search results because they don't have as much feedback. They don't have as many clicks to feed their machine learning algorithms. And so the search results have never been as good for smaller languages, and it's always been harder for Google to fight spam just because the algorithms weren't as good. They were so easy to game because the level of certainty was correlated with the low level of machine learning feedback. But when you back everything up to an entity, this means that Google can apply the understanding of entities that it has in its strongest languages and use those and leverage those even in its weakest, smallest languages where it's struggled historically. So this is something that Google cares a lot about. The other thing that makes entities important is because they work well for voice and for related queries. And we'll dig more into that in a minute. But what you have to understand, once you kind of grapple with entities and get your mind around how an entity is different from a keyword, then you can kind of understand why we're saying there are now two kinds of results in SEO. There are inclusions, hosted inclusions that often look like this in position 0, and then there's organic, and it's like organic blue links. And so in this example, we can see that at the top, we have the hosted inclusions that have videos, images, great, really interactive content. But below that, it's a lot of blue links. So here's knowledge graph. You can drill down into the knowledge graph. You've got images. But when you scroll down past the people also ask, past the videos, you're just in the blue links. And the hosted inclusions are important because we believe that hosted inclusions are part of the knowledge graph, whereas the organic blue links may or may not be incorporated into the knowledge graph. And from what we've seen, especially since mobile first indexing is launched, Google loves hosted inclusions. Historically, we've had things like featured snippets, and we think that those have been tied to the knowledge graph, but now Google's kind of doubling down and making more different kinds of hosted inclusions, and they're not always ranking at the top, like position 0. Now they seem to be ranking in the middle and down low as well. So when we talk about hosted inclusions, some examples are things like found on the web, which in this one, when you click the down arrow in this found on the web for food delivery options, it gives you a featured snippet about each of the brands. But then we also have app packs for hosted inclusions, maps, people also ask, and knowledge graph. So all of these things are feeding off of information that's in the knowledge graph. And they're kind of different vignettes into what Google knows about a certain topic. Found on the web pulls in that case, comparisons of the different food delivery apps, or comparisons of the different apps that are available, comparison of the different places in the business, or related questions, and people also ask. But what's important to notice on this particular knowledge graph is how aggressive Google is being right now at adding things to the knowledge graph. So the first thing to notice here is that the knowledge graph shows a query for chilies, bloom, and onion, and it shows pictures and it shows a write-up. The problem here is that Chili's doesn't have a bloomin' onion. The restaurant that has the bloomin' onion is Outback Steakhouse. Chili's has the awesome blossom. But in this example, it acts like, Google acts like Chili's bloomin' onion is totally a thing, and there's a write-up about it. Now, if you read the write-up, what you might see is it's been nominated as the worst appetizer in America. So if you're Chili's, maybe you don't want this to show, right? You would rather have Chili's awesome blossom, and maybe that gets a better review. But whoever wrote this information about the Chili's bloomin' onion was not a fan. But this is now canonicalized in the knowledge graph as if it was something absolutely true, undeniable, and that it totally exists. The thing is, it totally doesn't. Then you can also look down lower and notice that in the people also searched for, there are other aspects or other items from Chili's menu included in Google's knowledge graph. So apparently Google's knowledge graph has information about things that actually aren't on the menu, like the bloomin' onion, but also has information about Chili's onion rings, Chili's fried pickles, Chili's chicken fried steak. So more and more things are getting added to Google's knowledge graph, and Google's being really aggressive and really bullish about adding things to the knowledge graph, and they're doing it even when those things don't actually exist, at the potential risk or expense of reality or truth, right? They just want to know it. They want it in the knowledge graph, and maybe it doesn't matter so much if it's true. But that's a problem if you're Chili's and you're a brand and you care about it. But what we've seen is that Google is being so aggressive, and that it seems like anything that Google hosts, including things like AMP, where they're hosting it in their AMP cache, or things that they ingest as a feed, like a news feed or an XML feed, these things seem to have a ranking advantage from Google's perspective because Google's giving them priority. Even if Google says that they don't give an algorithmic advantage to content like AMP, let's say, those AMP carousels do sure seem to float to the top. It's as if maybe Google's thin slicing of the truth, and the AMP original page doesn't get an algorithmic advantage, but AMP content as a whole is evaluated maybe slightly differently or by a different algorithm that floats it to the top, and maybe floats other things that Google hosts and understands to the top. And Google will deny this all day, but you can see with your own eyes that AMP carousels are often very high in the rankings compared to other content with the same ranking signal. But the other thing to know about hosted inclusions and anything that Google hosts or has in the knowledge graph is that they can speak it on a Google Home or a Google Assistant. If they host it, they can speak it, they can read it, they can put it through their voice processors. But if it were just a website, that would be much harder for Google to speak. And you can imagine what a bad experience it would be if a screen reader were to try and read your website from a Google Home device. That would be pretty bad. But when it's curated into the knowledge graph or into a knowledge graph result or into a featured snippet or something like that, that makes it easier for Google not to get confused and hung up on JavaScript or get hung up on anything, because it's kind of a known quantity that Google's already pre-formatted to be spoken. But what you probably don't realize is that in the speaking, they can also translate it. And so what we have here in an example is a query. And in this query, we put Guardians of the Galaxy in Greek, but we set the phone language to Japanese. And you can see the top of the query up here is Greek, but this result is in Japanese. And if you were to scroll down below the knowledge graph, the blue links would go back to Greek. But Google is trying, since we set the phone language to Japanese, Google is trying to make knowledge graph content more suited to what we've specifically indicated that we want by setting the phone language to Japanese. So let me just say it one more time. The query is in Greek, the stuff below the knowledge graph is in Greek, but the knowledge graph is in Japanese because we set the phone language to Japanese. Here's another example. Again, the query is in Greek, but we set the phone language to Spanish this time. It's essentially the same result, but now it's in Spanish. And again, the content below this knowledge graph would be back to Greek. because Google's matching on the keywords up there. So what this tells us is that Google is treating knowledge graph content differently. They're treating it with more care, and that it's language agnostic, right? Anything in the knowledge graph is an entity. It's language agnostic. They're ready, willing, and able to translate it to meet your needs. So that's pretty interesting. The other thing that we know is that Google is launching stuff like AMP highlighting for featured snippets, where they take a featured snippet that ranks over here. You can see a VPN or virtual private network allows you to create secure connection to another. But when you click through on this featured snippet, Google scrolls immediately to the featured snippet and highlights it for the user. And this is something, again, Google can do by virtue of hosting and processing the AMP content. It can help control, make the user experience better by showing the content from the featured snippet in its context. And so that's pretty cool. But they can also remix AMP content, and this is something that might be a big deal. This is Giada, and what it's doing is taking a bunch of different facts that it's picked up from AMP and pictures and remixing them. And you can see it's giving credit along the bottom. It's citing the AMP article that this stuff came from, but it's made a more engaging version of that content in the form of a story or a slideshow, probably using artificial intelligence, machine learning, AI, by taking, what do people care about most for most celebrities and putting it on a timeline like this. And this is powerful content for a user, but if they're ripping off your AMP content, it might be a little bit less good. So the problem is that with Google caring more and more about hosting content and hosted inclusions and stuff like that, what we see is that in reality, people aren't clicking, especially in mobile. So from a search result, from a Google search result, people are clicking through now only about, or people are not clicking through about 61.5% of the time. So they're doing the search and they're getting exactly what they need from the search result without clicking through to a website. You can see this graph from SparkToro, that's why Rand Space is there. This graph compares desktop and mobile, and you can see that in desktop, people are clicking through, or people are not clicking through 34% of the time, so it's a much better situation on desktop. But for mobile, people seem to be getting the information they want directly from the search results. What that means is if you're looking at your analytics, for every 100 searches on Google Mobile, 61.5 of those 100 aren't getting a click at all. 38.5 click through to organic, and 3.4 click on a paid result, and that's September 2018 data. But what that means is that 61.5% of the mobile search data is not represented in your analytics. So if mobile search represents more than half of the searches, but more than half of the searches aren't represented in your analytics, because what we know about analytics, search from Google Analytics or Omniture, whatever you're using, it only shows you data after the click. It's not showing you data before the click. So if you're looking at mobile SEO and saying, I'm a data-driven marketer, and what I care about is data, but then you're making your decisions about mobile SEO based on only 35 or 38.5% of the data, that's rough. So more than half of the queries, because more than half of the queries are mobile, you're using only you're basing your decisions on 38.5% of the data. That's not what I would be proud of in terms of being a data-driven marketer. That means that we're ignoring a very large portion of our searchers. So that's troubling. So when we think about why Google would do this, why we would care as SEOs, what you have to understand is people aren't clicking because position 0 hosted inclusions are actually more interesting than blue links. When we get to blue links in this example, it's boring. The stuff that's interesting tends to be the stuff that Google hosts because it has pictures, it has stars, it has icons, it has specialized information. Compared to blue links, people, when they get into the blue link section of a mobile search result, they scroll back up because they're not finding the interesting, compelling information. Answers, featured snippets, and then people also ask. These are also good reasons that people aren't clicking through to websites, because they're either getting the answer that they want at the top in a featured snippet, or just below most featured snippets now, we're seeing people also ask. And those expand to show more featured snippets. So this means that people might be answering their question without getting to the website. And it could be that you have the featured snippet that they're getting the answer from, but since they don't actually click through to your website, it's still not going to show up in your analytics. So these things like found on the web and all of these different kinds of hosted inclusions are growing in frequency, variety, and functionality. And they're adding more and more imagery to everything that Google hosts to make it a compelling result. The problem is that they're so interactive, like this found on the web stuff is so interactive and useful, that it's distracting from the stuff below it. So you can see this is a carousel of featured snippets, and we can expand it and find more information here about competitors. And that's really so interactive and so useful from the search result that people want to stay and play there, rather than knowing that if they scroll down and click on a blue link, they're going to have to read and they're going to have to hunt through a potentially frustrating website to find what they're looking for. The other thing that we're seeing a lot that Rob Bucci from Stat wrote about is answer carousels. And he said that what he saw is the answer carousels are actually more common on desktop than they are on mobile. But answer carousels are things like this, where we have an answer or featured snippet, but you can drill down within that to get more featured snippets on that topic. And Rob also talked about how the number of featured snippets from April 2018 to August 2018 has grown 6x. So we're getting more featured snippets with more functionality and things like carousels that people might click on. So for instance, this Grubhub result, this isn't fully a featured snippet, but it does have quite a long description, and it does have the kind of answer carousel looking links at the bottom. But in your analytics, if you're doing any kind of rank counting, this would just count as whatever position it's ranking, and you would get the attribution just for this top link here. But it might not tell you that you're also getting these sublinks. And so even after position 0, results are changing dramatically, where we get more and more images. But also, you have to start thinking, with all of those links in one result, what does ranking in position 1 or even ranking in position 3 even mean? Like, is interesting finds being counted as 4 links or not counted at all? Is the people also asked being counted in your position ranking or not? And so even if you're ranking, the point here is even if you're ranking in position 1 organic, if you're below interesting finds, people also ask, featured snippet with an answer carousel, how good is that really? The idea is that the number of available clicks in mobile is going way down, and the value of even ranking position 1 is also going way down because of all of the stuff that Google is putting in the search results. So just look how big an answer might be with an image. And then we have these other things where you have jump links included in the search result. We call these fraggles because it's a fragment and a handle. When you click through, it not only goes to the page, but it scrolls down to the specific content on the page with a jump link. And Google is superimposing. Sometimes there are jump links on the page, but Google's sometimes adding the jump links for you and scrolling for you, kind of like it did in the AMP highlighting, where you don't even have to program the jump link in there, and Google is getting users to that information. And then sometimes even you have these fraggles with images where it's listing not just text, but images and scrolling you through. So this one is like a food guide, Denver gluten-free food guide. And when you click through, it scrolls directly to each restaurant, right? And so does this count as one link, or there are 4 showing here for the Eater Denver? Does it count as 4? And so it makes it hard for you to trust any kind of rank tracking that you're getting that says you're in position 1 or 3 or whatever, even out of Google Search Console. It's hard to know what those numbers really mean with all of the new kinds of inclusions in a search result. So that's a lot of information. Let's talk through another case study and see how this might impact the user or how this might impact you in your day-to-day SEO activity. So we're talking about Airstreams, and if you look at Instagram, living in an Airstream seems so luxurious and amazing, and you'll meet all these friends, and you'll be camping, and everything you do will go on Instagram because it'll all be so beautiful and photogenic. But again, I think that's probably not the reality. The reality probably looks more like this, where you're eating sloppy joes, and this is fancy sloppy joes because you've got a bottle of wine. The reality is a bit less awesome. So let's talk about it, because it looks like this dude is about to burn the breakfast. If he were to burn the breakfast, we might want to order some food. If we're in a delivery area where a delivery driver could get, if we're in a KOA that's near enough to a city that has one of the food delivery apps, what would that look like as a user, and what would that look like as an SEO? So as an SEO, this is a pretty big problem, this kind of a client, because if you're thinking about any of the popular food ordering apps, they have lots of potential queries in lots of potential cities, lots of competition, and they have a really, really complex search result because of the nature of the business. So let's understand this a bit better. All of the restaurants that would list in a food delivery app or website, they have SEOs too. So all of these companies, they have websites, they may have apps, and they have SEO teams. So they're both partners and competition. But then you have to realize that every time you drive in your Airstream or just anywhere, you're going to get a different result. But the intent that Google assumes when you're searching for food is a restaurant, not delivery. So Google's going to want to show a map pack. But if you're doing SEO for a food delivery app, that's probably not what you want. What you want is your app results to show up, or even your web results to show up. And you can see here, Grubhub, for example, is showing up below the map pack. But again, the map pack is so compelling. And you can see here that in some cases in the map, people and companies, restaurants are already associated with an online ordering platform. So how do you compete? Knowing that, for instance, this particular coffee shop does delivery with both Postmates and Grubhub, but only one is listed there. So again, how do you compete? It can be really tough. This is a really challenging SEO problem. But then add into it that all of those restaurants that we saw logos for before are often listing in all of the delivery options. And so all of these delivery options have SEOs too. And so everyone is going after a very similar set of queries to try and get the food ordering traffic. So we can look at this and say, okay, we've given up on Florida. We're going to go to Alaska, and we want to find the best food delivery app in Alaska. So we put this all into our tool to see, hypothetically, what would show up for best food delivery app when we're searching from Anchorage, Alaska. And we can start tracking and do weekly reports to see how variable are these, how much do they change, and test in multiple locations to see, is it the same in Alaska, in Anchorage versus Boston, right? Anchorage and Boston are two very different cities. So we can set up regular reports to see how much is the location changing the way the search result looks. And then we can test in some of the big cities for, let's say we're working for a particular food delivery app. Let's say we're looking at food delivery in a couple different places. So this one is New Jersey. We can click down to Georgia. And then scroll down and look at the actual results of if a person was standing in that at that particular address, what does the result look like? And, you know, does our food app have a chance, and or what does the food app have to do to compete for this kind of query? So when you click around, you can see that number one, the map pack is super strong, even for food delivery, where you're saying that you don't want to drive. You're getting map packs. So Google's kind of maybe messing up on the intent, but you can also see up there that there's a lot of PPC taking place that's pushing even the map pack down. So maybe in this case, SEO isn't the way to go, because we're going to have to really make a compelling first place organic result to look better than all of the PPC and the map pack, even though it's much lower on the page. Because look how many things are going on up here. And then we've got, this is DoorDash. So if we're DoorDash, that's great. And it's a carousel. So that's great for this location. But overall, the map pack and the PPC that shows up above it is so much more compelling that it might just be a better use of money to do PPC potentially. But anyway, so we take the top 6 cities in this case, look at 2 different template variations that we know are in play, and look at our top 5 keywords. And so we used our tools to make a spreadsheet like this, where we color-coded the different apps or the different competitors that we're ranking for our top keywords in this query, and then color-coded it. So pink, luckily, happened to be our client, but you can see that there are some places where pink is really strong, like in this one, but then there are some places where pink is not so strong and we have a lot of competition. And then we did it for both iOS and Android, and you can see here and in a couple other places there's actually variation between iOS and Android. And this one's just hypothetical, but in general, you can see that there's variability, and we didn't even bother to track more than 5 results. So hypothetically, we created an ongoing report and saved the test to track this on a weekly or monthly basis to see how are things changing. Is the stuff that we're doing in SEO actually working? Are we doing a good job of getting featured snippets, keeping featured snippets that we have, or anything like that? And the main takeaway on this one was simply that PPC and maps were taking up so much room. And so we started looking into PPC, and what we found was that Google's ad click-through rate has increased 125% in roughly the past 9 months. And you can see starting in May 2017, or July 2017 is when mobile PPC click-through surpassed desktop, and it's continued to grow and grow, whereas desktop is also growing, but not as fast. And so what we realized is if the CTR on PPC is growing at such a rate, then this has got to take away from the total number of available clicks to organic. If people are clicking on PPC, then they're less likely to be clicking on organic or even in maps or anywhere else. Once they click, they might be gone forever because they get what they need. And so we started looking around and saw that in some cases, some queries and some industries have way more PPC than others, and sometimes more compelling PPC. So these ones are just blue links. They're not that great. But in other cases, we found that PPC can be really compelling, like in these answers where we have the brand clusters, Bed Bath & Beyond, Walmart, so like a store cluster. But then for the Container Store, we have this massive slideshow thing that has images where you can click through 7 different slides. So if those things are ranking for a search result, that's obviously going to be so compelling. It takes up so much room and it's got this gorgeous picture that people are going to click on that instead of clicking on an organic result. So these are other things that can potentially take users' eyes off of organic rankings. And then what we also found is that the ads really do actually draw your eye away. In some cases, you can see on the farthest on the left, we have ads for how to get chilies delivered. And each one of these has an icon, it has stars, it has an install button. That's eye-catching, that's going to draw your attention. But then even in this Chipotle Mexican Grill landing page, when we click through, we see DoorDash has an ad on their landing page saying order now. So if you're about to go to Chili's and either call or get directions, DoorDash is here trying to interrupt the experience. And even when you click through onto a map and you're about to walk or drive to a particular restaurant, DoorDash is saying, hey, don't bother. Let us deliver this food to you. We deliver with this restaurant. So they're trying to interrupt your normal flow, which could be good, could be bad, depending on what company you're working for. But if you're Mount Fuji Japanese restaurant here, know that you're going to pay or lose money, lose revenue, if the order goes through DoorDash compared to if someone walked in and ordered food, right? That's less margin to be had. So again, lots of conflicting interests here. So let's look at one more case study really quickly. So let's assume you're in your Airstream and you've been fed. You've had your food. Now you just want to relax and watch some TV. So what we wanted to find out in this case study is how are TV rankings being impacted by location, especially things like local TV news. So we did a couple tests where we looked at TV news rankings from different places to see is it always the major news stations like NBC that are ranking, or are some of the minor news stations coming through as well? And so you can see here we have a little bit of a difference between the iPhone and the Android device, but the New Jersey specific rankings are down low. And we've got, in some cases, Albany, a city in New York, outranking New Jersey stations, which could be good, could be bad. Probably bad if you're a New Jersey news station. Then in this one from Chicago, we've got some of the major stations, but journalism.org is still up there at the top. And we've got some of the network TV stations fighting out, but they don't look that compelling. It's a lot of text links, blue organic. It seems like Google doesn't really understand this stuff in the knowledge graph. And then Google's including top news stories that are not news stations. They don't have anything, they're not a TV station, but it's news about the TV stations. So that's interesting as well. But in general, what we found is that Google is less good at understanding things like local news compared to local restaurants. They do an okay job, but overall not great. And it depends really, the proximity has sometimes a strong impact, but not as strong as you might like if you're a local news station, because like the Albany ranking was showing up when you're in New Jersey. And so the location was kind of getting confused in Google's brain for this kind of a query. So we did a similar test where we started searching for local news in a small business radius to see how far or close do you have to be to get the right ranking. And then we compared that to big known brands like SpongeBob. And what we found was a big known brand like SpongeBob is getting knowledge graphs, but the local TV stations aren't yet. And so that changes the way the result looks drastically. Now, in most cases, this one on the left, they both look the same, but we also caught Google doing a test where they were replacing knowledge graphs with these kind of bubbled results with separate cards. But in the most case, when we did the search, we got this knowledge graph. And in the knowledge graph, it has places where you can click through to watch specific videos. So if you're trying to rank organically, but this knowledge graph is above you, it's going to be really hard to get the attention because this knowledge graph is so interactive, so great. But if you're a news station, you still care about the blue organic links much more. If you're SpongeBob, or if you're the company that manages SpongeBob, you care more about knowledge graph and optimizing and making sure that everything in the knowledge graph is correct. And so when we search watch SpongeBob, the only thing that changed from place to place was really the time zone. And you can see over here we have Eastern time, and it shows you the time that you can watch SpongeBob. And when we change to a different location that's in a different time zone, that part changes, but the rest of the knowledge graph stays the same. So we found that knowledge graph wasn't that impacted by location. So if you're an entity that's in the knowledge graph, you don't have to, what you have to do is optimize the knowledge graph. And if you're like a local news station that's not yet in the knowledge graph, you can either try to get in the knowledge graph or continue regular SEO to optimize for the blue link ranking. So we did a similar project like this, coded it the same way where we put the two topic groupings, news and kids programming, and color coded it again. And what we found here is just that Google does care a lot about video, especially big brands and intellectual property. And you can see global monthly mobile data by type. Mobile video is the biggest one and the one that is expected to grow the most. And so there are more eyes on ads in the web than on TV now. So Google really wants to be here because they know that there are cable cutters like our Airstream owners that are not going to pay. They're just going to watch on demand, and they're going to surface the content through search. And so Google's already working with connected TVs to show things like Big Buck Bunny. When you search for it by voice, it's showing you the featured snippet and the places you can watch it. And so this is where all of the knowledge graph and stuff is going to go, into these kinds of searches that are cross-device, where you might want to be searching for tell me about Katherine Johnson from Hidden Figures, and it lists the featured snippet from the knowledge graph about her. And so this is what Google sees as the future. So when we're talking about optimizing for mobile first indexing, this is what you have to keep in mind. Even if you're not in a media company, scenarios like this where there's cross-device and voice included, if Google has an answer or hosted inclusion, then it can lift it and represent it somewhere else. And that's the main thing. So what was learned today, I think, is that your analytics don't show you the full picture because people aren't actually clicking in the most cases on mobile searches. And that the bubble, the thing that you carry around where you're only testing on your phone from your location, is hurting you more than it's helping you, that you need to be testing from other locations and on other phones. And that finally, there's no substitute for seeing a real life mobile search result. And so we encourage you not just to stare at your data, but also to do real tests on real phones from the places where potential searchers might be searching. And so I've gone ahead, if you guys want to try any of these things out, I've set up a promo code that's just rioseo, all one word and all caps. And you can test any of these tools that I showed you that we used for the case studies. This will get you 30 days for free. And that's it for me. And I think Brian's going to come back on and join us. But thanks for your attention.
Great. Thank you, Cindy, and some great insights that you shared with us all. Before we wrap up, I just want to reiterate to the audience some of the things in which that really resonated with me. One, entity-based management is even really more important now, more so than ever, that mobile first indexing is in place, especially since Google accounts for about 95% of all mobile search traffic. Position one is not always what you think, Google attempts to amass entities in a variety of sources to provide compelling and engaging content. The thing you need to do is look at your analytics are not just showing it the full picture, but they're only a substitute for seeing the real life mobile SERP. So thanks to your tool set there for showing us some of the real life examples. And then reviewing mobile results are absolutely essential to determine the best optimization approach, as sometimes organic may not or local may not be the best performance. So more cohesive strategy between your paid and earned media appears to be absolutely essential. So finally, thank you again, Cindy. I do appreciate it, and as well as extending the promotional code out to all of our audience members. I'm excited for them to be able to try that for the next 30 days when they sign up. At this point, to be respectful of everybody's time, I don't think we have enough time for Q&A, but please feel free to actually put your questions in the chat. Cindy, myself, will be working hard after this to be able to follow up with you directly with your questions that you may propose. And I do, again, thank everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.